Hello and welcome to the 2018 Unified Track and Field season. This is Allie Rock speaking, and I am presenting this year's Coach's Resource Guide. This webinar is being recorded and will be available for anyone to review at any time. This is going to be a meticulous overview of the Coach's Resource Guide to be used by district representatives and coaches to refer back to as you begin your unified track and field seasons. Please make sure that after you have viewed this webinar, you also go through the resource guide, your hard copy, on your own, and make sure that you're familiar with all the rules so that you any questions you may have after this webinar and after reading can be properly addressed. So without further ado, let's get started. You'll see as you open your Coach's Resource Guide that presented right up front is our season timeline. Wednesday, March 1st is the designated day by Maryland Public Secondary Schools Athletic Association as the spring sport start date. So all unified sports may begin practice on that date. Excuse me, that should be Thursday, March 1st. Wednesday, March 21st is the first day that is eligible for play. So spring sports, including unified track and field, may begin competition on March 21st. Please make note that unless otherwise told by your district representative, Wednesday, March 21st is the date that Special Olympics Maryland applications for participation and affirmations of eligibility are due to your district representative or your regional sports director in the absence of a district representative. Competition must be completed for county championships by Friday, May 4th. This includes any rain delays. Your district representative or your regional sports director will help you to make sure that your county championships are completed by then. All participating schools, school systems during Unified Track and Field attend the state invitational. So therefore, all coaches must attend the pre-competition coaches webinar on Tuesday, May 9th. It is slated to begin at 7 p.m. Please register at the link provided in the digital copy of the Coach's Resource Guide and register early. You can go ahead and do that at any time once you receive this. The state invitational is split over 2 days. Tuesday, May 15th will be the competition for all rosters of 20 or fewer team members. And Wednesday, May 16th is slated for larger rosters of 21 or more. The inclement weather date is for Thursday, May 17th. So if there is a rain or otherwise rain out, I should say, on Tuesday, May 15th, the small rosters will compete on Thursday, May 17th, and Wednesday will remain in place, or vice versa. Roster sizes will be determined by the student athlete count on your affirmation of eligibility form, which, as I said, is due to your district representative or your regional sports director by March 21st. Please note that teams will conduct the interscholastic unified sports season for a minimum of 8 weeks, with teams practicing at least twice a week and participating in 3 or more competitions during the season. If you're unable to meet this expectation, please contact Melissa Kelly at mkelly@somd.org. To qualify for the state invitational, teams are to participate in at least 2 regular season competitions in addition to the county championship. So barring extensive inclement weather hardships, this will be strictly enforced as a qualifying requirement for the state invitational. Here on page 5, 3 on the printed copy are some coaches resources for best practices in coaching, both from the Special Olympics perspective and the track and field mainstream perspective. So please check those out, especially if you are new to coaching track and field or new to coaching unified sports. So beginning on page 4, here are the official rules and the overview of the unified track and field program. A track and field team shall consist of rosters of 12 or more student athletes who are of similar ages. So obviously meaning within the high school framework. A unified track and field team shall consist of an approximately equal number of athletes with intellectual and or physical disabilities and partners without intellectual and or physical disabilities. To promote an inclusive environment, as a guideline, it is recommended that a unified track and field team be composed proportionally of students with and without disabilities. However, no more than 70% of the roster may be composed of students with disabilities or students without disabilities. It is permitted for teams that do not meet the 12 student athlete minimum roster size to combine with a team in their district in order to compete. All student athletes need to have the appropriate paperwork required by the county school system, as well as a Special Olympics Maryland application for participation, which we will review later in this webinar. Teams are permitted to have one head coach or two co-head coaches. They may also have assistant coaches. Coaches must meet the standards delineated by the county as well as Special Olympics Maryland. They are required to complete and submit a Special Olympics Maryland Volunteer Class A form. Note this year, team rosters that are not compliant or have difficulty meeting the 70% proportionality rule may still be permitted to compete. We ask that those coaches submit an application for a leniency waiver to the Unified Track and Field Sports Management Team no less than 30 days prior to the state invitational. So the advisory committee is made up of the representatives from each of the local school systems and myself. And please note, if there is an instance when a representative is unavailable, we may appoint a proxy, and also that the representative from the local school system whose coach is applying for a waiver will recuse themselves. Events and entries. All track and field events will follow the National Federation of State High School Association rules, except where there are specific adjustments allowed by the Special Olympics Summer Sports Rules for athletics, which you can find at this attached link. You can also find the National Federation rule book via a hard copy, which you can purchase on Amazon, iTunes, or you can also get it for your Kindle from Amazon. And as always, we ask that you consider using Amazon Smile if you do intend to purchase the Kindle or hard copy from Amazon, because that benefits Special Olympics Maryland. The events for Unified Track and Field on the track are the 100 meter, 200 meter, 400 meter, and 800 meter runs, plus the 4x100 meter relay and the 4x400 meter relay. Field events are the mini javelin, the shot put, and the running long jump. Participants may enter one individual track event and one individual field event. They may also be selected to participate on one relay team. Relay teams must consist of 2 runners with disabilities and 2 people without disabilities, so those designated as unified partners, and the coaches may place them in any running order. A unified track and field team may enter a maximum of 2 4x100 meter relay teams and 2 4x400 meter relay teams. Combined schools, as we mentioned a moment ago, schools that combine to meet the 12-person roster minimum will pre-designate 2 4x100 meter relay teams and 2 4x400 meter relay teams as competing teams. If there are any remaining relay teams that were present before the teams combined, if available, they may participate as exhibition. We accommodate that on a case-by-case basis. Event rules. Every coach should obtain a copy of the rule book. Here in the coach's resource guide are just some rule reminders and highlights of common points of confusion and concern. I'm going to briefly touch on each of these. It is crucial that you review these extensively on your own. For track events, for the purposes of race assistance, student athletes must race by themselves. A coach or family member or escort staff cannot run, walk with, or move with the student athletes, and the student athlete will be disqualified if the aforementioned is violated. We will talk later about accommodations for student athletes whose disability may require assistance on or off the track. Event selection. Please make sure that students are entered into events that they can successfully compete in. So a student athlete who's unable to run or cannot move their own wheelchair manually, for example, should not be entered in track events. Similarly, if a student doesn't have the range of motion for the mini javelin or the shot put due to maybe a physical disability that afflicts their arms, those students should not be entered into those particular field events. So make sure that appropriate events are selected. Student athletes with visual impairments may have adaptations. They may use a guide rope. They may use a human guide provided by the meet if there's a run on a curve or they're unable to use a guide rope. More information on that is later in this coach's resource guide. In races that are run in lanes and including a curve, the student athlete must stay in the lane. Cutting into an inside lane is a disqualification. In races run entirely on the straight part of the track, no disqualification for leaving the lane unless there's an impede of another runner or they leave the track entirely. Lane violations, all races that are run in lanes, each competitor shall keep within his or her allocated lane from start to finish. Student athletes using assistive devices to ambulate, such as crutches, walker, wheelchair, will be given 2 lanes. We do need to know about that ahead of time, which you'll designate on your affirmation of eligibility, which I'll show you later in the presentation. Race starts will start with a gun without exception. All student athletes should be trained to start with a gun. In extreme cases, the starter will reposition himself or herself, but will still use the gun. So students who are startled by that sound should not be entered into a running event. Students with hearing impairments should watch for the smoke of the gun, but also may be provided with a supplemental tap or a flag start, and that is at the starter's discretion. Start commands for races up to and including the 400 meter. There is a 3-command start: on your marks, set, and then the gun fires. For the 800, there is a 2-command start: on your marks, gun fires. And then student athletes are allowed to use blocks in the races up to and including the 400 meter, and a volunteer may be used to anchor the back of the starting block. For race starts, the 200 meter has a stagger start and runners stay in their lanes throughout. 400 meter is also a stagger start and must stay in lanes throughout. 800 race is a waterfall start, and the runners may break immediately as long as they do not impede one another. And the last lap in individual races, distances of 2 laps or more, will be signified with a bell. The 4x100 meter has a stagger start. The 4x400 meter has a 1-turn stagger start. Please note when passing the baton, they must be entirely within the exchange zone. If dropped during the exchange, the incoming runner must pick it up and complete the exchange, and you may use the quote-unquote fly zone. Relay teams. Two alternates may be registered for each relay team. One may only serve as an alternate for a single relay team, not multiple relay teams. So if for reasons of injury or absence, a member of one of your relay teams is unable to attend the meet, you may activate an alternate. The person, the alternate, has to replace someone of a like position. So therefore, a student with a disability has to replace the missing student athlete with a disability, and the unified partner must replace a unified partner. The alternates should be of similar ability, and to ensure fairness, the maximum effort rule will be strictly applied to all relay teams, regardless of alternates, with a 20% threshold. That means that should you activate an alternate and the team outperforms their qualifying time by 20% or more, they will be automatically disqualified. And when I say this is strictly enforced, I mean it is strictly enforced, even if you go over by a tenth of a second. So just this is a moment where I'm going to impress upon you that it is very important to submit correct and accurate qualifying times, so that something unfortunate doesn't happen at the state competition, where there was an opportunity for you to submit an improved performance score, and you didn't take that opportunity to let us know that the relay had actually improved, so that this threshold isn't hit. And then track events for athletes using wheelchairs. To provide competitive opportunities for athletes using wheelchairs, the races for student athletes using a wheelchair will be only at the 100 meter, 200 meter, 400 meter, and 800 meter. Motorized wheelchairs shall not be allowed in manual wheelchair races, and only athletes who ambulate by use of a wheelchair may participate in those events. Athletes cannot be pushed, pulled, or otherwise assisted during the events, and the lanes for the wheelchair events shall be made 2 track lanes wide. If there's only one entry division in the wheelchair, in a race with a wheelchair, the division will be permitted to compete in a mixed race alongside runners in the specific race. So we will combine a division with maybe a few number of runners. However, the single participant in a wheelchair competes against the clock and should be encouraged to acquire a personal best, but they are not competing against each other, just to note that. In the shot put, which is a 3-kilogram shot, the competitor must not leave the circle until the implement has touched the ground, and therefore must exit only from the back half of the ring. The competitor may touch the inside of the iron band only, and must start from a stationary position. The shot must be held near the neck or chin. The throwing arm must not drop behind or below the shoulder level. The competitor may not touch the top of the stop board. Any part of the body may extend over the band or stop board, provided it does not touch the ground outside the circle. If the throwing implement lands on a vector line, it is considered a foul. To break ties, between 2 student athletes, you go to the next best performance for both of them. For the running long jump, the front of the toe board is 1 meter from the edge of the sand pit. Please note that most long jump pits do not have a 1 meter toe board, and therefore you should make one with chalk or adhesive tape, but not duct tape, because it is slippery with wet shoe soles. Student athletes must be able to jump at least 1 meter to enter this event. If the student athlete does not reach the pit, it is a fault. Runners can place a marker on the side of the runway, but not on the runway itself. And you are to measure from the nearest impression in the sand made by the student athlete, even if it's made by a brush of clothing. For the mini javelin, the mini javelin is held by a grip in one hand only, with at least the little finger on the grip or whipcord. While in the act of throwing the mini javelin, the competitor may not do a 360-degree turn during his or her run-up. The mini javelin must be released with an over-the-shoulder motion only, no side arm or below the shoulder releases. The competitor may not place any marks on the runway. competitor must remain in the delivery area behind the arc until the javelin strikes the ground, then leave from behind the arc and the lines drawn from the extremities of the arc. To break ties between competitors, the next best performance is used, and it is counted as a foul if the competitor touches with any part of the body the arc as marked, or any ground beyond the arc or throwing back. The runway is 4 meters wide and a minimum of 8 meters long. This image below shows you how you can set up the vector lines for the mini javelin and the runway. And there are some general rules for field events. In the long jump, standing long jump, and throwing events, each athlete shall be allowed 3 non-consecutive attempts. All 3 attempts shall be measured and recorded for breaking ties. The longest measurement of the 3 attempts shall be used for scoring. Athlete's second best and then third best attempts shall be used to break ties. For individual field event competitions, this only applies to the long jump and combined events. A competitor shall be charged with a foul if the competitor does not initiate an attempt within 1 minute after the competitor's name has been called, in addition to a visual indication made by the event judge. So included this year are regulations for extensive student-athlete accommodations. Special Olympics Maryland and participating schools shall provide reasonable accommodations necessary to provide students with disabilities with equal opportunities to participate to the fullest extent possible. Accommodations will not be provided if 1, there is an objective safety risk to the student or others, 2, it fundamentally alters the nature of the sport itself. So during track events, assistance to athletes that may be provided are guide runners, and assistance for athletes will be permitted to accompany athletes onto the competition area. Guide runners or assistants must be clearly identified by wearing a distinctively colored vest provided by the meet organizing committee. Athletes must provide their own guide runners. When competing with a guide runner, the method of guidance for athletes shall be the use of a tether or non-elastic material with a maximum length of 100 centimeters. The tether attachment shall only be established between hands and or arms of the pair. In addition, the runner may receive verbal instruction from the guide runner. The guide is not allowed to use a bicycle or other mechanical means of transport. The guide runner is not allowed to pull or propel the athlete in order to gain an advantage at any stage during the race. Athletes and their guide runners must use a tether except under exceptional circumstances at the discretion of the technical delegate or referee, or during the last 10 meters of an event, the retention of the tether does not apply provided interference does not occur. Note, cones should be placed 10 meters before the finish line on both sides of the track as a visual cue for the athletes and officials. There are sources for extensive accommodations here at United in Stride and Attendly Guide Running. Assistance to athletes in field events. An assistant, preferably a teammate, may bring athletes to the throwing circle or runway. The assistant may assist the student athlete by orienting them within the throwing circle or on the runway before each attempt. The assistant must leave the circle or runway before the attempt begins. Acoustic orientation is permitted before, during, and after each attempt. The assistant can stand in the back of the long jump pit or throwing vector to tell the student athlete which direction to run or throw, and when he or she approaches the pit, takeoff, or the throw foul line. Student athletes may only be guided from the circle or runway after the officials have determined whether or not the attempt was a valid one. I should also note here, these extensive accommodations, as you can tell, are for the visually impaired or blind students who may be competing in unified track and field. If the official in charge of the event decides that the assistant who is providing acoustic orientation is in an unsafe location, then the official has the right to require the assistant to move. Divisioning and team scoring. Competition is conducted in co-ed divisions composed of competitors with similar abilities. Divisions consist of competitors with and without disabilities and are only determined by the participants' ability levels as expressed by times or distances. And I should note that those have to be submitted prior to, which is point number 2. Qualifying times and distances must be submitted at least 10 days prior to a competition for the events in which he or she will be entered. As a guideline, the variance between the highest and lowest score in a competition division should be no more than 15%. However, this variance can be greater if there is a need for fuller divisions of 4 or more competitors. The minimum number of competitors in a division should be 3, and the maximum number is 8. The same policy applies to the number of teams in a division at a larger invitational. Every event competition division results in the same allocation of points awarded to the teams. For example, if there are 7 divisions of this 100 meters, competitors in each of the divisions will score points for their teams based upon their place of finish. Please note when teams with rosters of greatly varied sizes compete in the same division. For example, a team with a roster of 12 competing against a roster of 20. A weighted scoring system may be employed to balance the inherent advantage of the larger rosters. If it's necessary to use a weighted scoring system, the formula used for determining the weight or score multiplier will be issued prior to the competition. So please note that that is something that may be issued as an addendum or a supplement should that be necessary for competition. Team scoring is based upon the format delineated in the National Federation of State High School Associations Track and Field Rulebook for dual meets. Since all competition divisions score points for a team, the Unified Track and Field rules modification is as followed. For all meets, first place scores 5 points, second place scores 3 points, and third place scores 1 point. Just want to emphasize certain points. Sportsmanship. In the spirit of sportsmanship, please have your teams come together and shake hands after competition. For event registration, teams will be divisioned based on the total roster size. So you are strongly encouraged to register each student athlete in the maximum number of events to ensure the maximum number of scoring opportunities. Maximum effort. It is really important that student athletes, both with and without disabilities, compete with the maximum effort so that we are ensuring that all divisions are based on the maximum effort that a student athlete has used to qualify, and so that all divisions are equitable. It is the responsibility of the student athletes to develop sportsmanship. All athletes are expected to follow the Special Olympics official sports rules and athletes' code of conduct. Athletes are expected to give maximum effort when competing. The responsibility of the coach is to place the health and safety of athletes above all else. They too must follow the official sport rules and coach's code of conduct. Coaches are critical in helping competition management teams make divisioning work. And by doing so, that means that they have submitted preliminary scores that reflect the true ability of the student athletes. A competitor's ability is the primary factor in divisioning Special Olympics competitions. The ability of a competitor or relay team is determined by an entry score from a competition prior or the result of a seeding round or a preliminary event at the competition itself. The principle of meaningful involvement is the most important of the 7 criteria of the success of the Special Olympics Unified Sports Program. So fundamentally, the principle of meaningful involvement ensures that every player is given an opportunity to contribute to the success of his or her team through their own unique skills and qualities. That means that every teammate, A, demonstrates sufficient sport-specific skills and game understanding. B plays a valued role on the team that emphasizes his or her personal talents. And C has an opportunity to play without a heightened risk of injury. Please go through this section of the Coach's Resource Guide so that you understand this principle. And I'll just touch on the indicators of when the principle is being adhered to and when it's not achieved. Indicators of the meaningful involvement principle are that teammates compete without causing undue risk or injury to themselves or others. They participate according to the rules of the competition. They have the ability and opportunity to contribute to the success of the team, and they are able to adjust their skills according to those of other players, resulting in improved performance by team members with lesser ability. However, the principle is not achieved when certain teammates may display superior sports skills without involving their teammates. They serve predominantly as on-field coaches rather than teammates or mentors. They control most aspects of the game, especially during the most critical periods. They do not train or practice regularly and only show up on the day of the competition, or they lower their level of ability dramatically so they do not hurt others or control the entire game. It's really important that all coaches and program leaders understand this principle prior to the selection of teammates. Please review in depth the uniform requirements. The National Federation of State High School Associations rules for track and field and cross country shall govern our uniform and jewelry policy. So the competitors' uniforms shall be school issued and worn as intended by the manufacturer. All competitors must wear shoes. Each competitor shall have a full-length track top or one-piece uniform issued by the school. There's lots of specific rules about how large logos may be, if an American flag is affixed to the uniform. So please review those in depth as you see on the screen now within your own copy of the Coach's Resource Guide. Please note there's no bare midriff tops that are allowed. The top must hang below or be tucked into the waistband of the bottom when the competitor is standing upright. Any visible garments worn underneath the uniform top must be unadorned and of a single solid color. If there's more than one visible undergarment, say it's a cold day and there needs to be a lot of layering going on, those visible garments that are worn under the uniform must be of the same color. Also of note, there is a penalty for wearing an illegal uniform. When a violation is observed and noted by a meet official, the competitor shall be required to make the uniform legal before becoming eligible for further competition and shall be issued a warning that a subsequent violation shall result in a disqualification from the event. The referee shall be notified of the violation by the observing meet official, and the referee shall then notify or cause to be notified the head coach of the offending school of the competitor's violation and warning. And please know that uniform violations are strictly enforced at the state invitational. A special note on jewelry. The prohibition on jewelry was lifted by the 2015 National Federation rule changes. However, jewelry, with the exception of those that are defined above, which I'll briefly go over, are still going to be prohibited in all unified track and field competitions. So jewelry is not to be worn by competitors except in the cases of medical alert medals, religious medals, and unadorned devices such as bobby pins, barrettes, or hair clips. But those can be no longer than 2 inches, and maybe, obviously they were worn to control a competitor's hair. So please note when something is not considered a piece of jewelry here in Article 3. And also know that we have decided as a committee that we will not permit jewelry, even though the National Federation rules now do. Please, coaches, this was a big problem at the state invitational last year. So please do not let your student athletes show up to the staging area wearing any sort of jewelry at all. And that includes taping over things like nose rings or earrings. That will not be acceptable. And there are penalties for violations of the jewelry rule as well. During ceremonies, student athletes must be in their uniform or a proper school-issued warm-up, and they must be wearing proper footwear. Cannot wear hats, rimless headwear, including bandanas. Oh, excuse me, no hats, rimless headwear, including bandanas, are allowed. Religious and medical-related headwear is permissible. Headbands, wristbands, and armbands must be of solid color. If a solid color piece of material may be folded, tied, and used as a headband as long as it is not wider than 2 inches. Please review if you need to order new unified uniforms this year. They must be compliant with the logo, the official Special Olympics Unified Sports logo. Okay, here is the information for the 2018 State High School Track and Field Invitational, including the inclement weather dates. You'll see the schedule below. Competition begins following the opening ceremonies. We will conclude somewhere around 4 p.m., but please note that award ceremonies are tentative because that's based on the rhythm and flow of the competition. And as a reminder, the coaches pre-competition webinar will be on May 9th at 7 p.m. Please register at that link. As I mentioned, during the season timeline, there is some paperwork that must be submitted for each student athlete and for each team. The application for participation, which is contained in Supplement A, must be submitted for each student athlete. Please make sure it is filled out in its entirety. Every line must be filled out. Every box must be checked. There must be an emergency contact name and contact information, and it must be signed. These forms will be submitted to your district representative, and where there is not a district representative, to the regional sports director for Special Olympics Maryland. Please, coaches, you are our first line, our first line of defense, our first set of eyes on these. Please check them for accuracy before submitting them to your district representative or regional sports director, because when they are submitted by that person to Special Olympics Maryland, they must be free from error. Each team will submit an affirmation of eligibility. This is every student athlete who comes out for the sport. You will put their first and last name. Please designate whether they have a disability or not, gender, date of birth. It's also very crucial that you note whether the student athlete uses a wheelchair or another ambulatory device. And also you'll note there's an extra set of boxes at the end of the affirmation of eligibility this year. If you're a returning coach, this is new after beginning with the winter sports season this year. We've added this. If you have any additional team personnel, such as a team manager and an instructional assistant that would travel with the team, paraprofessional, interpreter, a medical assistant of any sort, any non-student athlete who would be traveling with your team for competition, including the state competition, must be listed on this form ahead of time, and they must complete the criteria for a Class A volunteer, which I will go over in just a moment. But please note, if you are going to be bringing a non-student athlete with you to any Special Olympics event, including the state invitational, they must be listed on this affirmation of eligibility, which is due to your district representative or your regional sports director on March 21st. All of those non-student athletes require a Class A volunteer clearance, which the information provided on these following pages is how to obtain that. All Class A forms are to be submitted to the Special Olympics Maryland Regional Sports Director assigned to your region. You can see the contact list on a subsequent page, and they are due on or before the date of the district tournament or county championship, or when state tournament credentials are subject to rejection. Please, 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 coaches, get these forms in as soon as possible. This is how to become a certified Class A volunteer. Background checks and volunteer clearances, including protective behaviors, are valid for 3 years. And please note the steps for verification. There's 2 steps: the volunteer application and release. There is a different application for persons under the age of 18. Please have the student minor reference form completed by 2 non-family references. And then you have to watch the protective behaviors and complete a short quiz, which is available at the link you see on your screen. If you have any questions regarding this process, please contact your regional sports director. This is the contact page. As you'll see, the regional sports director for Allegheny, which is Melissa Anger, acts as the district representative for Allegheny County. The district representatives for Charles County are Michelle Ignashevsky and Seth Brock. For Frederick County is Michelle Hill. And for Prince George's County, Earl Hawkins is the interim contact for right now. And then the regional sports directors you'll find below: Melissa Anger for Allegheny, and Kristen Mullins for Charles, Prince George's, and St. Mary's. Excuse me, Melissa Anger is also the Frederick County contact, and also Washington County. And then you'll also see at the bottom of the page my contact information, my email, and the email contact information for Melissa Kelly, who's the Senior Director for School Sports Programs. And that concludes our review of the Coach's Resource Guide. Supplement A, B, and C are the forms we just reviewed, which you can copy in bulk for your student athletes. Here, as I said, is the application for participation. Supplement B is the affirmation of eligibility. And supplement C is the volunteer application and release for those Class A volunteers. So as a reminder, this Coach's Resource Guide can be found on the Google Drive that has been set up for coaches, and a link will be sent to you by your district representative. And it will also be provided to you in hard copy, which will be mailed through your intra-school communication system or mailing system by your district representative, possibly before you even view this webinar. If you have any questions, please contact your district representative first, which let me scroll up to the contact list and review those again. So if you have any questions, your first point of contact is your district representative. So for Allegheny County is Melissa Anger, who is the Special Olympics staff, who is an acting district representative. For Charles County, that's Michelle Ignashevsky or Seth Rock. For Frederick County, that is Michelle Hill. For Prince George's, the interim contact is Mr. Earl Hawkins. And for Washington County is Barb Cosner. So that's your first line of contact for any questions that you have. If they are unable to answer a question, they will reach out to the regional sports director or to Melissa or myself for any sort of questions that are a little bit more in need of a more detailed response. I want to wish you the best of luck in your seasons this year, and we will see you at the state competition. Thanks.